Hello, everyone. This is Travis J. Vernon, and welcome to today's podcast. Well, it's spring in the Rockies. We're going through the standard weather patterns. A week ago, it was 65 degrees, working in the garden, enjoying life. Then we had a windstorm, 4 inches of snow, rain, mud, freezing temperatures. Yesterday's morning temp was 14 degrees. Today's 24. And this afternoon, we're supposed to be back up to 55. It does make it a little bit hard to plan when you're going to risk putting your plants outside. We've been working on our greenhouse, which that was probably one of the hardest things about moving to a new house, is we had a rhythm with our garden, how things would go, how things would grow. And now we've had to start that all completely over again. I've got all the trusses for the greenhouse. I still need to build the walls. I've got raised beds done, but I'm going to put those under glass. It's about the only way that we can get certain things to grow properly. A lot of people say you can't even get tomatoes in Wyoming, but we've always had good luck with tomatoes, even before we had the greenhouse. And now at this house, last year, we had a bunch of tomatoes that came up through the garden, but we did start our plants indoors in March. So by the time they went out, when we were done with the greatest chance of frost, because in Wyoming you can't say there's not a chance of frost any month, but the greatest chance of frost is usually done by about the middle of May, first part of June. Makes it kind of hard to get your corn knee-high by the 4th of July when you don't have but a month to get it to grow. Well, this year we've decided to add another tier to the garden, because where my garden is, it's a little bit of a sloped hill. So we leveled out the spot where the raised beds are. Then we leveled out another spot for more plants that aren't going to be underneath the greenhouse covering. And now I've added another garden to that. In the meantime, we spend a lot of time working on the exterior of the home, the landscaping. Where we are, we have a small gravel pit on our 5 acres. And from that pit, we're able to gather pea gravel that we use for a lot of our walkways. So we're sifting gravel and sand. The bigger river-sized rocks we use in landscaping. The sand we add to either the chicken coop or as a base for stonework. And then the pea-sized gravel, like I said, we use it for walkways because it's small, round gravel and it's pleasant to walk on even when you're barefoot. Plus, in all my spare time, I need to have something to do. But I really do enjoy working in the yard. So the amount of time Nancy and I spend outside is great. We enjoy it. We get a lot done. It's hard sometimes to convey the visions I have of what I expect it to look like or what I think it'll look like in a few years. So sometimes she just trusts me. Other times it goes the other way where she's trying to explain to me how she would like a certain flower bed, how she wants it to look when it's in full bloom. And I can't always see her visions either. So we compromise a lot. We have certain spots that I take over, certain spots she takes over. And we work well as a team that way. Well, this is also the time of year that I start really jonesing for the high country. I want to get up to the high mountain lakes. I want to get up to those high mountain streams. Do some backpacking, some camping. And I just really couldn't bring myself this year to head down to the desert. The guide season was a super busy one. And the fishing season's already picking up, but what a bizarre winter we've had. Thank goodness we had about 120% snowpack this year. So we've still got a good amount of water in most of the regions that I hunt and fish. And these last couple of storms are going to help that as well. I already have all my bookings for September and October done. Of the 61 days, I'm booked for 53. So it looks like it'll be a busy fall. And it's going to be hard for Nancy and I to get a few days to get out and hunt. But fingers crossed, some of my clients tag out early. A lot of fish trips starting to roll in now too. Most of June is booked. July is starting. A couple in August. We haven't received our draws yet for the state of Wyoming. So hopefully Nancy and I draw our antelope tags. There's just something about chasing pronghorns that I absolutely love. I have a couple days off right during the prime time of the elk rut, so I'll get a few days of elk hunting, I hope, during the archery season. It's been a couple years since I've been able to chase mule deer, because this area of the state, after a really, really bad winter, we lost a lot of numbers to the herd, so they've reduced the number of days you can hunt. And it's down to 6 days for rifle season. And I guide all 6 of those days. So there's no way for me to get out and chase mule deer with a rifle, which is fine. I like hunting them with a bow. But then when I only get 4 or 5 days in the entire month of September, and the elk and the mule deer coincide, I often lean towards a bugling elk. And I don't know why, because I love hunting mule deer. They're just different. They're different types of exciting and fun. Been sitting here in the den this morning looking out of the mountains, all the snow-capped peaks, watching mule deer feed through the yard. The cottontails have been kind of flighty. The jackrabbits are already changing back to brown. All telltale signs of the heat to come soon. So when I think about the difference between guiding fishing and guiding hunting, I think some of the biggest differences are you can spend an entire week with a client or by yourself chasing a herd of elk or trying to get in bow range of a nice bull. Often a lot of close calls, close chances. But to get that one opportunity where you can make a good shot may or may not happen in a 5-day hunt. Versus on a fly fishing trip, if you miss a strike or you lose a fish that you've hooked that you're reeling in, while there's a slight disappointment, you're going to have more opportunities that same day. Maybe that same 10 minutes. I think that's one of the biggest differences. You put in so much time and effort on big game for what may be your one and only opportunity, and so much can go wrong. But as I've said before, an entire hunt can change in just 5 seconds. It can go from the best hunt you've ever been on to the worst with a wounded animal or a missed shot. It can go from the worst hunt you've ever been on, haven't seen an animal at all, to the absolute best when you peek around that next ridge or you see that antler shining from the bush and you find where a nice bull or buck is bedded. So sometimes as a guide, it gets difficult because you're always trying to manage not only your own emotions, but the emotions of your client. There's been a few times for me where it's been difficult to not be frustrated. And more than that, it's hard to not allow the frustration to show. But it can be difficult when you work as hard as you work to put someone in a position to get that shot. And when they mess up, you have to keep that positive attitude and say, that's okay, let's find another. Sometimes in the back of your head wondering if it's even possible to find another in whatever time is left. I had an experience last season. It was the last hunt of the year, the first week of November, late season muzzleloader elk. The newer muzzleloaders have a lot of rules and restrictions depending on what state you go to. I was hunting in Utah, who had just changed the rules to a 1 power scope was the maximum power you could have on a muzzleloader. Even though a lot of those muzzleloaders nowadays can shoot out to 500 or 600 yards, there's still a lot of room for error in many of them. So it takes away from it a little bit when a muzzleloader shoots just like a rifle. It's almost just an additional hunt. So I can see why they would put different rules and regs on it. I'm kind of a fan of having a traditional muzzleloader hunt where you either have a flintlock or a cap, a side cap, instead of using a primer for your ignition source. I got to do that quite a bit as I was growing up, and I really enjoyed that hunt. I don't see any reason why they couldn't do a traditional muzzleloader hunt for however many number of days, and then have a modern muzzleloader hunt. But then that gets complicated too. Most of the areas that I'm in don't even have muzzleloader hunts. Wyoming doesn't have a muzzleloader season in any of the places that I hunt. So it's not something I really even need to worry about. But on this day, I had a great gentleman that I was guiding. He was there with a friend, and his friend was being guided by another guide. Kind of a divide and conquer scenario, where instead of hunting together, we hunted apart so that we could cover more of the ranch. We'd seen some bulls. We'd seen a few elk. We'd bounced around from ranch to ranch, trying to get these gentlemen close to an elk that they could shoot. And while we'd seen some, they were not in the location that we could get to, or even if we could get in to see those elk, there's no way to get in muzzleloader range on a couple of these locations, because you'd end up shooting across a canyon and it was just out of range. Well, on the 5th day of the hunt, I found a small bachelor group of bulls, and we tried to sneak in on them. And as we worked down the ridge line, I'm getting ahead of the story. On the 5th day, we knew there were some bulls in an area in a small bachelor group, and we hadn't been able to find them. Now, the muzzleloader season went 1 day past the day these gentlemen had picked for their hunt. And at the lodge that night, the outfitter asked if I would be able to stay for one more day and guide for one more day, the last day of the season. And that was fine for me. I didn't need to be anywhere the next day, so I decided to stay an extra day and guide one more day. Now, the unique part about this, the client that I was guiding decided he didn't want to hunt that last day because he hadn't seen as many elk as he'd liked, and he decided to head back home and go back to work. And the other guide needed to leave the next day because he was heading out to hunt on a tag for himself. So I ended up taking the other guide's client for that last day. So in managing his expectations, they had seen a few more elk than we had, but again, it was nothing that they were able to get even close to. And you could tell he was a little bit down. He was a little bit disappointed in how the hunt was going. Now, there's things you can control and things you can't. There was one moment that we actually found 2 bedded bulls. I want to say it was day 2 or day 3. And we met up with the other guide and set up in 2 different spots just in case the bulls went one way or a different way. We'd have 2 areas covered. I don't know if they smelled us, heard us, saw us, but they snuck in between us and we never saw them. We ended up knowing what they did because of the tracks in the snow. They passed within about 300 yards of me and the client. We couldn't even hear them as they snuck through the snow. But that's how it is sometimes. That's how old bulls become old bulls. So on this last day, we were on a ranch I'd hunted previously in the year. I know the ranch well. I know where animals are. And the surrounding ranches have been getting a fair amount of pressure while this ranch hadn't gotten a lot of pressure. So I was hoping that there were a few bulls that had snuck on there and gone to some bachelor areas. So first thing the next morning, this is the last day of the hunt, day 6. I take my client, we take the side-by-side because there was a fair amount of snow. And we ran around to a spot that I like to glass from. As we stop the side-by-side and get out, I look down the canyon and I see 2 bulls sneaking through the sagebrush to the bottom of the canyon. Both are solid bulls. One's a nice 5x5, one's at least a small 6. And instantly, my client was excited. The last 5 days wiped from his memory, and now we start trying to put together a plan on how we could ambush these bulls. Well, the canyon they were going into was steep and deep, combination of pines, aspens, sage, oak brush, service berries, difficult terrain to sneak through, especially when there's some crunchy snow. So we decide to try and get around them and in front of them. So we back out of that area with the side-by-side, drove all the way around to the other side of that ridge, parked the side-by-side, and hiked about 1.5 miles up and over the top. You don't have a lot of time in the early morning to get onto the elk before you start having real big changes in the thermals. And I estimated we were within 200 or 300 yards of where these bulls should have been when the wind started to get sketchy. And I told my client, I know it's the last day. I know that we're on an elk right now, but we need to back out of here. We're going to screw this up. And instantly, I could tell from his face that all that disappointment that had been wiped away from the previous 5 days was back all at once. Boom. And I looked at him and I said, this is the right call. We need to back out. We have this afternoon. We need to wait till the thermals settle down. Depending on where they're bedded, I think we have a really good chance. We didn't bump them. We didn't spook them. If they're feeding on this side hill that we saw them on, they'll feed out of their bedding area and come back over to this side hill. The evening hunt is going to be our best chance to harvest one of these bulls. And I could tell he wanted just to push in and hunt. I could tell he didn't want to give up right then. But he listened to me. And we slowly snuck out of there. We hiked around a different ridge. And then we drove to a different part of the property. and continued to look for more elk, keeping these bulls in our back pocket. After lunch, we made a play, drove to a different entrance to a lower canyon below where those bulls were, and I told the client it's going to be a hike, because I had a gut feeling that if we hiked up and over the top of the ridge that they had been feeding on, we could have an opportunity to slide down the same hill and almost follow their tracks towards where their bedding area was until we'd gotten close enough to the other canyon wall that we could shoot across the canyon, hopefully at about 200 yards. We just needed to sneak into position so that we were ready when those bulls stood up from their beds and started to feed down. So we start making the hike. It's cold. Said there's snow. Some of the snow's starting to melt, so the south and west facing stuff was getting kind of sloppy mud. And this clay mud in Wyoming and Utah, it starts sticking to your boots, and pretty soon your boots weigh 8 pounds each. Then we get to the north facing and the east facing stuff, and it's still nice and cold. And that's complicated because that snow's loud. So we're weaving our way through the mud and the snow. We crest out on the top, and as we crest out, I slow way down. Couple steps glass, couple steps glass, couple steps glass. Because I don't know exactly where the bulls are. And I don't want to be the reason that we miss an opportunity. All of a sudden, out of the blue, there's a bull bedded in the wide open, worst case scenario, 20 feet from the pine trees that I thought they'd be bedded in. So I hit my rangefinder, and he's at 600 yards. My client said he is comfortable at 200, and he's confident at 300 if he can get a prone rested shot. So now the chess match begins. How can I get 300 yards closer to this elk when he's in the wide open and can see everything across the canyon? So we begin the cat and mouse game, where I would belly crawl until I would get into a new position, and then I would watch the bull while my client would belly crawl up to where I was. Through the mud, through the snow, through the cold. Anytime the bull would look our direction, I would stop the client from moving. Well, we continued this for a couple of hours. Now I'm starting to get worried because it's getting closer and closer to sunset, and we're going to run out of daylight. When suddenly the bull stands up and starts to feed, which makes our belly crawling easier because now he's occupied. Every time his head went down, we'd crawl. As we get closer, I found another bull that came into view. Then once they started feeding, I saw another bull. So now we've got 3 bulls. There's a small raghorn, a solid 5, and a nice 6. So we keep belly crawling in. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, they change their mind and decide they're going to start feeding towards the pines. So now every step they take is going to take them further away from us. It's getting late in the day, and I know once they step into the pines, we're done. So I look at my client, I get the range, and I said, hey, we're at 326. I think we can close that next 10 yards and get down to this area where we can shoot from, but we're going to have to go a little less cautiously or they're going to be out of range soon. And he said, all right, let's do it. So we made our last little belly crawl, got everything set up. He got ready to shoot. The elk started to realize something was going on, and that 6-point turned broadside and looked our direction. Shot goes off, solid hit, bull goes down, and everything turned to elation. 6 days of chasing elk. 6 days of trying to get in range. 6 days of pushing and pushing and pushing. And it all came down to a 10-yard belly crawl and a well-placed shot, and we ended with success. Now, had those elk seen us earlier, wouldn't have happened. If we would have tried to come around the way we had started in the morning, they would have seen and heard us long before we got in range. The way it ended up working out was almost the only way we could have killed that elk that evening. So sometimes it comes together, sometimes it works out. Now I will say That was a miserable 2-mile walk back to the side-by-side to try and get it in range to pack out that meat. We ended up getting back to the lodge at just after midnight. Wet, cold, muddy, tired, but still elated. Every hunt can change in just 5 minutes, sometimes in 5 seconds. It's looking the right place at the right time, keeping that positive mindset, not letting the little difficulties wear you down, not letting the situations overcome your thought processes, not pushing in when you know you shouldn't, but sometimes, like there at the end, taking a little bit of a risk to make it all happen. That was a truly amazing way to end my season. So get out there and live your stories.